I've been a user of the deep web for quite a long time, going through various deep sites and seeing what is out there. If you don't know what you're doing, I really don't recommend getting involved in it. I've been in too deep for a while, and the story that I'm about to tell you was at that time in my life where I was out of control and I was just doing stupid things. Back in the day, I used to be one of those deep or dark web users that may or may not have been involved in some questionable activity. Of said questionable activity, the worst was doing business with a website that was very similar to Silk Road, but it wasn't Silk Road. But it was obviously trying to be, and as dumb as it sounds, the prices were more competitive than the others. Thinking back to it now, that should have been a red flag. The bigger sites had methods of vetting and verification of their sellers. They knew who they were working with, and the security was definitely a part of the pricing structure. But when you're a broke college kid that is addicted to certain medications, you don't really think too hard in the security of your dealer. Basically, your only thoughts are, do they have what I want and can I afford it? So obviously, I knew what I was doing back when I got involved with all these sites and these people. I knew it was illegal, and I knew I had no way of disputing if my dealer didn't come through, and I would have no matter of taking legal action against the site or the seller. But the site had an interesting system in place. The sellers would list what they had beyond a few cryptic user tags, and they had what they called a traffic light system. Basically, the seller could mark their stock based on a colour. Green was full, yellow was limited, and red was offline and not selling. If it was green, you could basically send them the money and then get what you wanted. Yellow typically required a message to make sure they had what you wanted, and red meant do not contact me. It was pretty actually damn smart, you know? And it cut out having to criminate yourself by specifically listing what you had. And also cut down in the communication requirements. You just bought what you wanted and then moved on. In my time on the site, there was a user that I worked with regularly over the 2 years. They were dependable and, strangely enough, incredibly polite when I messaged them. I know that sounds stupid, but they typically sign their messages with, "Have a nice day," or "Thank you for your business," and that's not something you really expect from someone committed to doing something that's so illegal. They were the only person that I wanted to work with on the site, and they always came through for it. And in my time doing business with them, they've always been green or yellow. I cannot recall once over the 2 years where they ever switched over to red. Well, that is, until the last time that I put an order in with them. I got on the site as normal and saw that he had marked himself as yellow. No big deal. I sent him a message and basically asked if my usual was available. And almost immediately after that, his page switched over to red. I was really annoyed at this, as he'd always come through, and I was, as I said, an addict. So I decided to send him another message that said basically, "Hey man, what gives?" And within a few moments, I got a message back that said, well, to kindly put it, to F off. This came as an honest surprise to me because, like I said, he'd always been so cordial before, and I responded with something like, "What, you don't want my money anymore?" I waited for about an hour to see if he'd messaged me back, but I didn't get anything back. It was a few days later that I went back to see maybe if he had stock again, and I think part of me just seriously thought that the settler was having a bad day, or maybe it was his partner of his, or I don't know. And when I logged in, I saw that I had a message from him. I clicked it and it said, "I have your usual, send me the money." I was a bit wary at first, but I was also naive, so I clicked it. Despite my initial hesitation, I went ahead and sent him money. I replied and told him that it was sent, and then I waited. I think I messaged him once or twice that week, but he'd been offline since our interaction and hadn't changed his account from red. About a week after our last interaction, I got the package. The box looked like it was heavily used and trashy. This was in a complete contrast from what I was used to. It was lacking all the security that the seller normally had. He would typically pack inconspicuous items in with the order, usually stuffed animals. I'm assuming it was because they worked as both security and padding, but instead this box was just full of packing peanuts and tissue paper. I dumped it out on the floor and checked it, thinking I was being duped. But then I saw the pill bottle and an envelope, which appeared to be a letter. The first thing I did was open the letter. It said, "Consider this your last order. Jimmy is out of trade. Thank you for your business." I was a little pissed off since I was now going to have to find someone new on the site to work with, but at the same time it wasn't a huge deal. At least I had about 60 days before that was going to be a problem. That was my thought, until I grabbed the bottle and I opened it. I removed the lid and saw that inside the bottle were fingernails. And I don't mean like fingernail trimmings. I mean fingernails that had been ripped out of the bedding of the finger. 10 of them to be exact. The edges of them looked like they had dried blood, which told me that they had been forcibly removed. It was then that the letter's meaning became a little bit more dark. with Jimmy being out of the trade. To answer any potential questions, I never went back to the sites. I never went back to any drug sites on the deep web at all. This scared me to a point that I pretty much abandoned all illegal activity, and to those that are curious, no, I didn't go to the police. I wanted to tell them that it was possible that someone had been murdered, but how exactly does one explain that with what I had? I couldn't waltz into the precinct, slam a bottle of pills down full of fingernails, and say, "My drug dealer's been murdered." Technically, he could have pulled them off himself. Not likely, but possible. So anyways, that's my story. Stay off the dark web. Oh, and don't do drugs. This story actually happened to a co-worker and a very good friend of mine, and I made sure that he was okay with me submitting this story, and he said it was fine, but for privacy and security sakes, we're going to refer to him as Ron. Ron's a good guy, probably one of the most nicest people I've ever met, and he really didn't deserve the situation that happened to him. Several years ago, Ron lived in a comfortable suburban home with his lovely wife of 10 years, and for the sake of security, we're going to call her Karen. Ron and Karen had a 7-year-old daughter at the time of the story, and everything seemed alright. Ron had a good job and made more money than they actually needed, so Karen was a stay-at-home mum. Ron was under the impression that their marriage was in a good position. He loved Karen as much as he always had, and he loved his daughter more than life itself. He had a nice house, a nice neighbourhood, and they had enough money to take care of any financial emergencies if they needed it. To the best of Ron's knowledge, they were all happy and healthy, and he didn't think anything was wrong at home. Well, Karen, on the other hand, was apparently very unhappy with her marriage and was determined to leave Ron and run off with some guy that she'd met online and had been talking to for around a year. Karen and her internet boyfriend had apparently spent a lot of time plotting and spoke extensively how they could follow through and what they planned and what would be the best way to get the deed done. At one time, they even discussed the possibility of her internet boyfriend driving from his home in Nebraska and doing it himself, saying that he could make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Apparently, this would be too personal, and they opted to look on the dark web for someone to remove her husband from the equation. Then, she would wait long enough to bury him, collect the insurance, and then pretend to grieve. Then, after a few months, she planned to take their daughter and the money from his life insurance and run off with her new boyfriend to start a new life up north. They had the intent of going on the dark web and finding basically a hitman to get rid of her husband. Apparently, they were successful to an extent. They got on the deep web, they found a site that listed people providing these services, and they got the information from someone that they were going to pay to do the entire service. And they even went as far as sending $15,000 to the account of the person that was supposed to do the job. Thankfully for Ron, his wife and her new boyfriend were not very well versed in how things worked on the dark web, and to some extent were kind of stupid. Apparently, they went all the way through the plotting with this person, sent him the money, and even set a date. And on that date in question, Karen had taken their daughter to her grandparents' house and told Ron that she was going to spend the day with them. While she was gone, Ron got a visit by the local police and a federal agent. They explained the situation to him and basically took him into protective custody. When Karen got home, she expected to find her husband lying down on the living room floor, but instead, she had federal agents screaming at her and taking her to the ground. What's worse is she apparently brought their daughter home with her, meaning she would have been okay with the little girl seeing her father dead. Based on what Ron was told, the police had all the information on the conversations, the connection logs from when she was on the page, and emails from her to the fake hitman, and enough evidence to put her away for a very long time. Apparently, she was so desperate to get rid of him that she was able to be talked into sending the money over PayPal, and she literally sent $15,000 on a credit card over PayPal to have her husband murdered. I don't know if she was ignorant or if she just wanted it to be done and wasn't going to question the situation. Thankfully, for Ron's sake, she'd gotten hold of a sting on the side, and she was taken down without issue. The boyfriend was also arrested, and they were charged for conspiracy to commit murder and probably a few other charges, and they were both sentenced to 20 years in prison for their plans. Ron has since remarried, and his daughter is old enough now to understand what her mother did, but he says he got lucky with all this, and I totally agree. If his wife had just gone to another page, been a little more competent, and paid a little more attention to being secure in her messaging and communications, Ron may have legitimately been murdered that day, and she would be off living with her internet boyfriend in the Dakotas. So I'm a bit of a tech nerd by trade. At least I am nowadays. Back when I was much younger, I was a bit on the naive side. I knew that the dark web was this magical place where all these illegal dealings on the internet happened, and I knew that the service web had boring stuff like social media, flash games, and the like. I wanted to see what else was out there, and I wanted to see what others hadn't seen. And as such, I started looking into and started figuring out how to do it. I have been on the dark web a couple of times, once when I was like 17, which is what this story is going to be about, and a few times as I've gotten older, not to do anything illegal or make any illegal purchases, but just to see what I could get myself into without breaking the law. My first trip on the dark web, like I said, was quite a while ago. It was before Bitcoin became a big thing, and before it had anywhere near the value it has now. I was just a kid and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. This one personal adventure with the dark web actually started with said cryptocurrency. Most things like Bitcoin and the apps came from dark and deep web. They're not illegal to know about, but at the time they were pretty much the go-to currency when it came to illegal dealings out there. I mean, you can literally buy them on a phone app. They had a little in ways of value or meaning, and while they were worthless in pretty much every practical sense, they were pretty much used for everything you could use illegally to buy services and goods. Anyway, I was talking to some of my high school friends and a couple of guys that were older than me, and they mentioned Bitcoin. I had heard the term before, but I had no idea what they were or how the whole thing worked. Cutting a lot of the boring parts of the story out, I ended up getting to work on my parents' desktop and ended up on the deep web. It started here. I found a few pages where people were discussing random things but couldn't really find any of the information that I was looking for. These were pretty much your everyday deep web and just non-index pages where people would talk crap anonymously and then discuss their anti-government stances. From here, somehow, I ended up on the dark web marketplace, one of those pages where you can seriously buy drugs, weapons, anything and everything that you want, and that could easily land you in prison. Again, I wasn't looking to make a purchase, I was just looking for information, and I stumbled upon the user forum for this particular marketplace. Now, what I did was stupid, and I recommend if you want information, you should not go on the deep or dark web forum on a marketplace just to find it. But I got onto the forum, and I literally posted a question. What is Bitcoin? I fluffed it up a little bit, saying that I heard the term before and I wanted to do a report on it for extra credit at my high school. This part was a lie, but I think part of me thought I could get more honest info if I told them that I was a student and I was just looking for research. Asking this kind of question is dumb. It's a good question to ask your buddies, your co-workers, people you know, hell, even Google. But it's a terrible question to blurt out on a forum littered with criminals and people that were quite knowledgeable about illegal activity. Doing this will attract one of two things. You'll either be laughed at and ridiculed or scammed. I attracted the latter. I got several comments and messages from people that told me that they would sell me their Bitcoin and all I needed to do was give them my credit card info. One person said that they would mail me some Bitcoin if I sent them money over PayPal. And one guy said that if I gave him my address, he would hand deliver 1,000 Bitcoin to me for no cost. I may have been naive, but I wasn't stupid. This was still the dark web, and I didn't fall for any of these posts. And thankfully, there was actually an admin who took pity upon me. I actually remember his username too, Dark to Dust. He ended up deleting my post and messaged me with a, "Are you a troll or just an idiot?" message. I responded and I explained to him that I was honestly just a 17-year-old kid, that I needed some information for a report, and I told him that it was supposed to be for one of my finals. I thought that would be a good place to ask, but he responded with, "Get off the dark web, this place is not for people like you. You need to leave, uninstall the Tor browser and never come back to this place ever again." And before I could even respond, he actually messaged me back and said, "Do you really need information?" And I told him I did. Then he sent me a small write-up on how the chain block worked. He actually explained the basics of the algorithm for mining and how cryptocurrency existed. How, while it was intangible, it did have value. He even went on to predict that it would have real value in the future, and he told me that I should consider an investment for when I'm older, but not right now. Now this guy went out of his way to actually educate me on it and how the system worked and how to obtain Bitcoin. And this was all swell and good, and I really appreciated it. But it's how he finished off his messages that will make this a terrifying story. When he finished his write-up, he added a postscript, and it said the following: "P.S. Now that I've explained to you, I want you to copy it, paste it, put it into a document, save it, and get off the dark web. If I ever see you back here again, I will know it's you, Clara D. in West Virginia. I will personally come find you, and when I do, I will take one of your kidneys as payment." They net a pretty penny out here on the market, and considering your age, I could probably get extra. Sounds like you could probably piece this together. This situation, he knew my name, the state I lived, and I was kind of in a place where I needed to take this threat seriously. So I responded one more time and just said, yes, sir, copied the info and did what he told me to do. So, all this said, I just want to end the story by saying thank you, Dark to Dust, if you're ever listening. Your advice was plentiful and I understood the dangers of the darknet. I hope you and I never run into each other out there.